Joining me now for his first national TV interview since making it official, Pennsylvania Lieutenant Governor and now Senate candidate, Democrat John Fetterman. Lieutenant Governor Fetterman, good morning. Thanks for being back on your show.
Oh, it's great to be here. And before I get started, I'm pleased to report that Donald Trump retains 100% of the dead relative vote here in Pennsylvania. We uncovered another case of voter fraud voting for him. So we can rest assured that Pennsylvania had a free and secure election.
Still going after former President Trump. Is that why you decided to run? Talk to us about your decision here, given that recent history, all of it in light of the impeachment trial starting this week.
Yeah, my decision to run really is the culmination of full circle of the values, the policies, the principles, the people, the places. Why I came to such a marginalized place like Braddock 20 years ago. I would just encourage your viewers to thought exercise to go back and think about where the Democratic Party was back in 2001, a few years after ending welfare as we know it, a few years after the now infamous crime bill. I showed up here 20 years ago to really work against the raging inequality that I saw as a fundamental threat to our democracy and to our nation's health.
So let's talk about what would happen if you were in the Senate. You're obviously not right now. We know your position. You made it very clear at the top of this interview about Donald Trump. If you were in the Senate right now, obviously this impeachment trial begins tomorrow. Votes could happen possibly by the end of next week. You would vote to convict? Is that a safe assumption? And if so, would you also, if that didn't get through, would you vote to censure, as some Democratic senators have suggested?
I would promise to the people of Pennsylvania, I plan to be 100% sedition free if I'm elected to come. And there's already too many sedition curious members of the United States Senate, and I would never be one. And absolutely, the president should be impeached for his conduct, simply because of the fact that if not helping incite a riot where police officers were bludgeoned to death is not grounds for that, then why do we have that on the books in the first place?
There are a lot of voters in your state, I don't have to tell you, who support Donald Trump. Why should they vote for you to represent them in the Senate?
Well, I mean, there's some of them that absolutely won't, and I accept that. I would rather not have someone vote for me and then tell the truth and what I believe I know to be true, whether it's about paying a living wage that people can survive on, whether it's that healthcare is a fundamental human right, whether it's the members of our LGBTQIA communities deserve equal protection under the law, whether we should have compassionate, common sense immigration reform in this country, whether we should end this insane war on drugs and legalize weed across the United States, whether we should address the climate crisis that we are confronting here in this country. There's so many things that need to get done. And if you don't agree with me on any of those, I would hope you can still vote for me, but you'll at least know where I stand proudly, and I have for the past 20 years.
So let me ask you about some of those issues, because some of those will be things that, of course, a Senate will have to be thinking about in 2.5 years from now, 2 years from now. And let me start to get things through. There is a discussion among some Democratic senators that you need to basically end the filibuster, which is sort of the long way of saying that 60 vote threshold to get things done. There's not unanimous agreement in your party in the Senate on what should happen. Do you agree? Would you support ending the filibuster if you're in the Senate?
Yes, I would. And here's why, because these are some of fundamental changes that are truths. If you don't support raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, I want you to live and work for $7.25 an hour and show me how you can actually get by or feed your family, quite frankly. And in order to get those kind of important things passed, whether it's climate change or things like that, you need to get rid of the filibuster. This idea that some random senator from a state with 600,000 people can hold up the democratic will and the sense of urgency that these policies are coming from, I don't think that's very democratic at its core.
Would you vote, as it stands right now, in support of President Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID relief plan?
I would, but I was also deeply disappointed that it appears that the $15 an hour minimum wage isn't part of that, which I think it absolutely must. And to me, that's absolutely critical. I mean, you can send checks, and we should, because people are hurting. But what would that mean to millions of low-wage workers across Pennsylvania and the United States to say, hey, we've got a check for you now, but we have a giant pay raise for many of you in the pipeline because you deserve it? We have a body of individuals making $175,000 a year saying, thumbs down on raising the wage from $7.25 an hour. It's immoral. It's outrageous. And it's also a mathematical impossibility. We must raise the wage to $15 an hour. And if that costs me votes, hey, so be it. But he's going to tell the truth because it's a mathematical certainty.
You mentioned the climate crisis, and I don't think you've talked about where you stand on this issue. One of the executive orders that President Biden did very early on in his time in office a couple of weeks ago was to end construction on the Keystone XL pipeline. Do you think that was the right move for President Biden?
I think President Biden is walking the line appropriately between acknowledging that our energy sector is home to lots of jobs and also the reality that our energy sector provides the fossil fuels provides 40% of our nation's electricity. But he also recognizes how critical it is to address this climate emergency and is making that a priority. We had a president who was actively tearing up like the Paris Accord and other agreements and throwing environmental concerns away. And now you have a president who's building that back and making decisive actions like canceling the Keystone Pipeline, which some people don't support. And I think he made the right call. But there's also a lot of projects that I do support, including one across the street from my own home. And that's the expansion of a $1.3 billion greenest steel in the world facility here, too. We must maintain a balance between transitioning away from fossil fuels, but also safeguarding and holding the union way of life sacred and protecting those jobs and those workers that are currently in that sector.
So given that response, safe to say that you are not fully or wholly embracing the Green New Deal?
I'm embracing what the Green Ideal considers a priority. Like, the Green New Deal isn't a specific piece of legislation. What I am in support of is acknowledging that the climate crisis is absolutely real. The science is clear. We must act decisively, but we also must protect and we also must have a realistic transition. But I also want to emphasize, since my first statewide run in 2015, I have never accepted a dime of fossil fuel money ever in my first Senate race, in my race for lieutenant governor. And I've also signed the fossil fuel pledge, money banning for the 22 race that I just entered. So the decisions and the policies that I believe about this industry come from a place of sincere belief and understanding that often two things can be true at the same time, but it's never because I've received a single dime from the industry or anyone that works within it.
You were a big backer, of course, of Senator Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign back in 2016, former Sanders supporter yourself. Is there a concern among those advising you, or do you have the concern that perhaps you are too progressive for where Pennsylvania voters are right now?
No, I mean, I'm lieutenant governor, the second highest office holder. So, Pennsylvania must like something of what I stand for. And I don't consider my policies progressive. I mean, it's a mathematical fact. You can't live off $7.25 an hour. It's a mathematical, it's a biological fact that you're going to need health care and everyone should have access to health care. It's a scientific fact that the climate is changing and we have to address it. The LGBTQ community deserves just equal protection under the law. Marijuana was legalized in South Dakota. How the hell are we behind South Dakota on any issue? My God. So I don't think I'm too progressive. So the voters of Pennsylvania didn't think so.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. The delay is killing me here. Lieutenant Governor Fetterman, I'm sorry. I just wanted to ask quickly before I have to let you go, because you make the point. I know that one of your sort of slogans for your campaign is voters in basically every county, every voter. That's who you are looking for. Did the events, I wonder, because you and I have talked before about the post-election claims that Donald Trump made, those false claims, those lawsuits that were filed. Did the act of what happened on January 6th, the insurrection, is that what motivated you, do you think? Is that what put you over the edge to decide to go ahead and make this run?
Yeah, that certainly crystallized it. And you alluded to it before I came on. I mean, just spending months defending the lies. I mean, they're not baseless claims. When I was growing up as a kid, we used to call them lies. And they need to be called what they are, just bald-faced lies. Then they know better than anybody how untrue it is. I mentioned it earlier, 4 cases of voter fraud out of 7 million ballots. And yet people still in the GOP will get up and say that there was fraud in Pennsylvania, and that's just a lie. and we can't have that. So yeah, it all came together in a way I never would have foreseen. But so many lines have been crossed over these last 3 months that I didn't think we could or would in this country. But absolutely, it's what crystallized it. And then finally, what made that decision that much easier was that 38,000 and counting grassroots donors have stepped up when we just announced we're just kicking some tires looking at this race. So, those folks stepped up, and today was my turn to do that. And I'm so grateful for their support. I'm so honored that these folks have chipped in an average of $30. And I think that's the way campaigns should run.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.